We are 3 weeks from the trade deadline. It's what's on everybody's mind, especially on a day like today when the Dodgers didn't have a game. We have a mailbag. We're going to talk a lot about the future of third base for the Dodgers, what the trade deadline might look like, and maybe some concerns about Tyler Glasnow. So let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks to our everydayers for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. And thanks to those of you who are with us live here on, Monday night, Talking Dodgers. We appreciate all of you. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. So please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. If this is your first time with us, my name is Jeff Snyder. That guy next to me is my co-host, Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like most of you. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And like I said, Vince, no Dodger game this Monday night. They're traveling. I assume they're in Philadelphia by the time we're talking now. I hope so anyway. Hopefully getting a good night's sleep, ready to kick off a 3-game series with the Phillies, which should be a fun series. I hesitate to call it a postseason preview because the last 2 years I've gone on different radio shows and podcasts to talk about in 2022, it was the Dodgers Mets and the NLCS preview. And then both teams got knocked out in the first round. The first round they played in. I think the Padres knocked both teams out that year. And then last year, I went on one to talk about the Dodgers Braves NLCS preview. And then, that didn't happen either. So I'm not going to call this an NLCS preview. I hope it is, or at least I hope the Dodgers half of it is, but it should be a fun series. Excited about that. But seems like the thing on everybody's mind right now is a trade deadline, Vince.
Yeah, definitely. We're into July. We're 3 weeks away now from the actual deadline date. And with everything that's happened over the last few weeks, or specifically like last couple months, and then all the news we've gotten in the last week on guys recovering, it's really what we have to look forward to in terms of this Dodger team. But all this preface by saying like it's funny to see people speaking certainties like, oh, if the Dodgers don't get a starting pitcher and a bat, or if the Dodgers don't do this, Dodgers don't do that, they're not going to win the World Series. Like, we don't know that. The Dodgers have lost 2 worst teams that didn't have starting pitching or a bullpen or a good offense. And then all of a sudden in a 5 or 7 game series, they did have all those, or at least better than the Dodgers, and beat them. So, and the Dodgers have done that on the flip side as well. So,
yeah. There's nothing we can really know right now about how things are going to turn out in October. But with the trade deadline, we do know that the Dodgers have some weaknesses on their team that they will hopefully be able to address. And, it's kind of funny. There's not even really a consensus on what the Dodgers need at the trade deadline. Some people think pitching is most important. Some people think offense is most important. There's a few people who even think the bullpen is the most important. Realistically, all 3 of those things are probably things that the Dodgers wouldn't mind upgrading a little bit. And I guess let's jump into our first question here from our insider, Elliot Krieger. He says, you didn't address this possibility on yesterday's show, but Elliot says, I assume the Dodgers brought up Justin Wrobleski partly to showcase him for a possible trade. Do you think that's possible, or am I just making things up? With the timing of it right before the trade deadline seems like a possibility. And did he did well enough to possibly create some interest? You think that was part of the calculus in bringing him up, Vince?
Yeah, I actually did think about that specific point either after we got done or maybe this morning for whatever reason. The Dodgers and Justin Wrobleski were on my mind. And that was the exact thought I had, like, maybe it was to kind of showcase him a little bit, or at least put him out there. And, if he does well, it benefits you twofold because, he helped you potentially win a game, but also, could entice someone. The fact that he's called up now, that he's pitching a major league game. Like that could benefit some team. And realistically, like it's one of those where he could potentially go to a team and they throw him in, maybe not a contending team, but they could throw him in the rotation the rest of the way and see what he has and, go from there. So, yeah, I do think I don't think that was the driving factor. I do think that could have been a factor there.
Yeah, I think that's about right. The fact is, I think there's probably it's a risk, a calculated risk if you're doing that, because if a guy comes up and blows up in a bad way, then you kind of tanked his value. I do think Wrobleski seems to have that demeanor that he looks confident out there. And so I think that probably, yeah, if anything, I think he raised his trade stock a little bit if they are thinking about trading him. And the fact is, they have a lot of pitching prospects and a lot of needs. So yeah, I would guess that some pitching prospects, including some who have already pitched in the big leagues, are going to be traded. And Wrobleski definitely could be one of those for sure. Let's see. Like I said, a lot of stuff about the trade deadline. The second segment, we're going to talk mostly about third base because we had a lot of different questions about third base. Let's stick on the pitching side right now. This one comes from Ben in Las Vegas, another insider. He says, I'd appreciate your insight on Walker Buehler's future with the Dodgers. His struggles should make him cheaper in free agency this offseason. I have faith he gets back to form or somewhat close to it next season, as he'd be 2 years removed from Tommy John surgery. But what have you guys heard?
Well, haven't heard anything, but you got to imagine his future right now is through the end of this season. And it's one of those things where you try to balance between having enough starting pitching depth and not having too many starters that should be major league pitchers. The Dodgers have kind of threaded that needle the last few years where they've had, 5 or 6 major league pitchers on the roster, 3 to 5 potential major league ready arms in the minors, and they've had to work their way. Last year, they had to work their way through almost all those arms. This year, they've worked their way through some of those arms at this point. So for Walker Buehler, you look at the rotation next year, barring no injuries the rest of the season, you got Glasnow, Yamamoto, Ohtani, Stone, and then you'd have either Knack or Gonsolin or May or Kershaw
Miller.
if he comes back. Bobby Miller. Like, I just don't see, barring a lot of different things happening or some crazy resurgence in the sense of Walker Buehler, I just don't think it goes beyond this year for him and the Dodgers.
That's kind of where I'm at too. Especially, we didn't even mention rookie Sasaki, who's a possibility next year. There's a lot of, and there's probably River Ryan. I don't think we said his name. There's a lot of potential starters for the Dodgers next year. So unless Buehler was really, really wanting to go with the discount to stay with the Dodgers, it doesn't seem likely. So I guess the follow-up question I'd ask you, Vince, is do you think the Dodgers think about trading him? I don't know how much trade value he would have at this trade deadline, but do you think they think about trading him in the next 3 weeks?
I would, I don't think they're calling teams and saying, hey, here, Walker Buehler's available. I do think as teams start to navigate like the deadline and the new updated postseason picture, I do think there will be more, benefit for benefit contending teams trading. Like, you need a starter, I need a bat, let's flip them, or like, something like that. Or the Dodgers say, hey, you know what, we got this guy, we can get somebody that's close to major league ready for the next couple years down the line. That, not that they have enough starting pitching, but they do technically have enough right now, healthy starters and a couple guys on the men. So I don't think it would happen, but I do think that that's something that we're going to see a lot more in the coming years from teams, like whether it's borderline contender and borderline contender or borderline contender and World Series contender, whatever it is. I do think there might be some, I need this, you need that, let's trade.
Yeah, it could be interesting. I think of a team like the Rays that are good with pitchers, might, if the Dodgers were willing to eat some of Buehler's salary, maybe Buehler involved in a Rosarena trade, where they get some major, because the Rays aren't actually out of the playoff race yet. So that could be an interesting kind of idea. We're going to come back in a minute. We're going to talk about the third base situation. That seemed to be on a lot of people's minds when we ask for questions. So thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please keep it locked on Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs and other sports wind down, we get fewer and fewer games, and the sports just aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. I'm looking at the odds on FanDuel for tomorrow. The Dodgers and Phillies, scrolling down, there they are. I scrolled past them. I should have had it scrolled right to them when I started talking. Dodgers are minus 170 to win, which is I wouldn't put them at that much of favorites. Bobby Miller against Zach Wheeler. This kind of shows you a little bit of interesting stuff that maybe the odds makers aren't quite as in touch with baseball. This could be a good opportunity. Obviously, you're not going to bet against the Dodgers, but if you were looking at the over/under or the money line, different things. Oh no, sorry, I was wrong. The Phillies are favored. That's more like it. So Dodgers at plus 122. There's a chance when the Dodgers beat the Phillies, you can make a little money on that one. So there's all sorts of odds on FanDuel. Hopefully you're better at reading the odds than I am. Just head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Hey, we are back. Thanks again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Thanks to our everydayers, those of you who are with us every weekday morning or every evening when we're live, as the case may be. If you're not an everydayer, it's easy to become one. Just watch or listen every weekday morning. You can also go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. Text directly with us. It's just a few bucks a month, free 14-day trial. You can also check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the two 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. And you can catch every pitch of every Dodger game on SiriusXM or the SXM app by searching for Dodgers. And with that said, let's jump back into our questions, Vince. Like I said, we got a lot of people asking about third base. And I don't even know which order to go in. One of them is just a generic from Kevin in Monrovia. He says, Dodgers third base trade options. Anyone an exciting possibility? But then we have other people throwing out other names. I think our buddy Pat Dwyer threw out the idea of Miguel Sano. This person, Dan in Florida, asked about Alex Bregman, which is kind of interesting one. We've talked about Bregman in the past. The Astros are currently 2 games out in the AL West and 3.5 games out in the wild card. So probably not selling yet, but a bad stretch, a losing streak sometime in the next 3 weeks could make them sellers. And then we had one from Justin, an insider. He said, what about Andre Lipsius or Cody Hosey coming up to play third base for the Dodgers? They're both having great seasons at OKC. A lot to talk about all of those. So I figure now that we've read the questions, and I think there are actually a couple more, but we get the point. Third base is a big question mark now that we know that Max Muncy is shut back down. Let's start, I guess, with Alex Bregman.
Yeah. Well, now that the Astros are essentially back in the playoff hunt, I don't think they would move on from him. I would imagine first want to play out the rest of this season and maybe win and maybe keep him around. I guess I know the Astros, everything's been better from the Astros of late, so it's hard to be like, whatever. I would think pitching they could use. They've had a lot of guys. They've lost a few guys this year, so that could be one of those where I don't know if Walker Buehler maybe doesn't fit the bill, but you could find a way to make a deal for Bregman. I just don't think it's realistic now that the Astros. Nobody thinks the Mariners are going to hold them off in that AL West.
Yeah, I think that's true, and yeah, I think especially the Astros don't think that I don't think they're ever going to feel like they're out of it in that division, especially with the Rangers struggling. It's, if they're behind the Rangers, maybe, but a team like the Mariners that has, they have great pitching, but they have a lot of flaws. It's going to be hard to give up in that division, which probably saves some consternation for Dodger fans, because I do think there would be a lot of Dodger fans who would be upset at the idea of trading for Alex Bregman. Personally, I said this before we found out the Astros were cheaters. I said Alex Bregman is the kind of guy you hate if he's not on your team and you love him if he is on your team. And I mostly still feel that same way. I almost felt bad for Bregman after the cheating stuff came out, because Bregman in 2017 was a rookie. He's like, it's like he wasn't the team leader. He wasn't the instigator or anything of the cheating. By the time it came out and we found out about it, he was the team leader. So he's a guy who had to make a statement to the media, and it was wooden and awkward and bad. But yeah, realistically, the cheating wasn't on him as much as, the veterans who should have stopped it. So, of all the 2017 Astros, Bregman is one I would be more likely to be okay with the Dodgers getting if I thought he could help them win a World Series.
Yeah. I mean, we talked ourselves into Carlos Correa, and I think that's a lot worse than Bregman. So, and it would only be for half a season.
Right? I also think we maybe talked ourselves into Correa because we knew it wasn't going to happen. So,
I was on board with Correa, but yeah, I didn't think it was going to happen.
Yeah. Pat mentioned Miguel Sano, who Pat's argument was he couldn't be worse than Kevin Biggio. I'm definitely not, and I think Pat was talking about as kind of a stopgap, like right now until, they see what's going on with Muncy. But I feel like with so little time before the trade deadline, there's not really time for a stopgap, especially a guy like Miguel Sano, who is having a bad year and hasn't had a good year in a long time. He doesn't make much sense to me defensively, even with his improved physical conditioning. I suspect he could be worse than Kevin Biggio defensively, and not enough of an upgrade offensively. You disagree with any of that about Miguel Sano?
No, I didn't realize. I remember he started the year at the Angels, and then I just never heard from him again. So I assumed he wasn't doing well. But yeah, 4 combined homers between, about 60-some games in the minors and majors. And that doesn't excite you much. And then realistically, I don't know if he's ever much of a defender at any point other than a strong arm. So,
yeah. And then speaking of guys who aren't much of defenders, the question about Andre Lipsius and Cody Hosey. Hosey is a solid defensive third baseman, maybe even better than solid, and he's having a good year. He's got an OPS right around 900 in Oklahoma City, which, it's his first breakout season. He was a first round pick of the Dodgers, same year that Michael Busch was. Cody Hosey was on this podcast. He's a nice dude. His mom follows me on Twitter. I want nothing but the best for him. I don't know that I am sold on him as being a big league third baseman yet, just because like a 900 OPS in the PCL is not a true 900 OPS, and then throw in the major leagues is harder. And we've seen guys who hit much better than that in the Pacific Coast League and then came up and really struggled with the Dodgers.
Do you think he's past the point of prospectness to where they get to a point, hey, we bring him up, if he doesn't pan out and we have to DFA him, it's not a big deal?
I think that's a possibility, yeah, because he's not the top prospect anymore that he was when he was drafted, and so yeah, maybe that's a possibility. He's at the age where they probably do need to either see what he can do at the big leagues or trade him to somebody who will. And since he actually can play a good third base and they need a third baseman, maybe he would make sense, maybe sooner rather than later, to come up and get some at bats before the trade deadline, so they do have a little bit better idea. As for Andre Lipsius, he's hitting much better than Hosey even in AAA. But I was talking to somebody who has watched pretty much every Oklahoma City game and really knows his baseball stuff. If you guys were watching Clint's live stream a couple hours ago, Clint quoted me anonymously on this. I had texted him about it. It was me that texted him. This person told me that Lipsius's defense is even worse than his poor fielding percentages would suggest, which really isn't surprising, Vince. I think we kind of knew deep down inside there must be major defensive concerns on the Dodgers side for a guy to be hitting that well, plays 2 positions that the Dodgers have some needs at, and yet he's still not called up. Figured he must not play those positions very well.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, is like, okay, he's not going to play DH with the Dodgers. So that is one of those where, like, are they keeping him around just for the depth? Or, again, like a Hosey, like bring him up. And if he is that bad defensively, then DFA. And if he gets claimed, he gets claimed. Or if not, like, we're almost to that point. And I know that with the deadline so close, that the Dodgers can realistically tread water with what they have right now at third base. And if they don't acquire someone, then obviously it's a bigger deal. But we almost are to the point where, like, okay, if Hosey and Lipsius aren't realistically part of your future plans, which, you know, in a sense they're not, because the Dodgers have guys at those positions, they're just hurt right now, then, you know, maybe you just try them out.
Yeah, and I do wonder if that's basically what the Dodgers are thinking, that Lipsius isn't part of their plans, so rather have him keep raking in AAA, bump up that trade value as much as possible, because he's likely to be in a trade. But yeah, when you think about the guys who are currently on the Dodgers bench, I've said, I'm done with Kike Hernandez. His positional flexibility doesn't do nearly enough to make up for the fact that he's just a bad hitter now. And so I'd much rather have Andre Lipsius in that spot on the bench, where at least there's a chance of him getting some big hits when he does get chances to play. But again, you know, it's a major paradigm shift to just accept, okay, this guy can't play defense and we're going to bring him up anyway. Especially when you've already got Miguel Vargas, who is kind of in that boat. He's playing a passable left field. But you know, he's not getting much playing time either because of his defense. And so I don't know how many guys like that you can have. But, you know, it's interesting to think about. I do expect that Lipsius will either be on the Dodgers or some other big league team sometime in the next month or so.
Yeah.
We're going to come back in a minute. One more third base name I want to talk about that we didn't get a question about, but I was thinking about, and then we'll talk a little bit about Tyler Glasnow, a couple other things. So thanks again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. With PrizePicks, you could win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that. Make a PrizePicks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make PrizePicks the #1 fantasy sports app. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's promo code LOCKEDONMLB in the PrizePicks app for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. This episode is also brought to you by Tax Network USA. Here at Locked On Dodgers, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team. Whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs, it's year-round. And you know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season's over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. I'm an independent contractor doing this podcast, so my taxes are a little bit more complicated than a W-2 employee. So I need tax experts helping me every single year. And with over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon, and be sure to mention Locked On Dodgers at checkout, and you'll receive a $250 discount off their services. We are back. Thanks again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Thanks for being here live with us. The chat is popping as usual. We appreciate all of you. It's fun talking Dodgers with you guys live. We appreciate all you listening on the podcast on your way to work on Tuesday morning. Appreciate all of you. If you're not an everydayer, it's easy to become one. Just watch or listen every weekday morning, and you can make that easy on yourself by subscribing wherever you're watching or listening right now. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the YouTube comments section. If you're watching on YouTube after the fact, or even if you're watching live, you're in the chat, but also throw some comments in the comment section. You can also check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles. The Locked On Dodgers postcast is after most Dodger games over on Locked On Sports Los Angeles, hosted by Pete Fox, live for about a half hour after each game. And you can catch every pitch of every Dodger game on SiriusXM or the SXM app by searching for Dodgers. So I mentioned I was watching Clint's live stream over at All Dodgers a couple hours ago, And Clint is all aboard the Ryan McMahon train, even though he recognizes that the Rockies don't like to trade star third baseman or anybody else to the Dodgers. And so recognize that it's probably not realistic. Vince, how high on your dream list of third base replacements is Ryan McMahon?
He just got named an all-star, which, doesn't always mean too much, but means that he's having a good season right now. At this point, it makes sense. Even if Muncy does come back, does McMahon play in the outfield? I forgot. I didn't have this stuff, but
he's been second base and third base mostly in his career.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, any flexibility you can have. Ryan McMahon comes back. Muncy, you figure it out. You get talent on your team, you figure the rest out, and I think that's where we're at right now. And especially like you mentioned yesterday's episode with Muncy coming back and the swing and everything else, like he could come back in late August, September, and then just not find his swing, and then you have a guy that can play defense at their base, but maybe a guy that can't hit. That you're going to still bat higher in the lineup than normal, and they're going to come up in big spots. So. I mean, Ryan McMahon makes sense. Another name I thought about the other day after I saw him on the All-Star list, his name's been floated around a little bit, not to the Dodgers specifically, but Isaac Paredes from the Rays. The Rays are always looking to continue to retool the roster, and in a year where maybe they don't say, hey, we're going to retool, we're not going to look to try, like we're going to try and make the playoffs, but we're not looking to maybe be World Series contenders.
Yeah, Paredes would be interesting too, for sure. I would love to get Ryan McMahon. Speaking of Ryans, my son Ryan is in the chat here. Y'all be nice to him. Watch your language. He's 13 years old. He is an innocent young man, but I'm glad he's here. He doesn't usually get to be in here with us live because we usually record after his bedtime, but you know what? It's summer vacation and we're recording early. Our next question comes from Matt Gadd, our buddy from Victoria, BC, Canada. And he says, can you address what needs to happen with Tyler Glasnow? Does he need extra rest to avoid burning out prior to October? Pete on the postcast sort of alluded a few times to it. What are your thoughts on Glasnow? You concerned, Vince?
I'm not concerned. And before the season, we had even mentioned like there's probably going to be an IL stint at some point for Glasnow just to kind of monitor those innings. But the thing is that the major injuries had the last few years was, he talked about it, was one injury that wasn't treated or cared for properly the first time, and then resulted in him having to get Tommy John surgery and the second time around. So knowing that, just knowing like it's not like it's not like he's a small guy. It's not like anything. Like this guy's big. He's ripped. Like we've seen him. I don't think that other than the actual arm and everything in there, I don't see him breaking down so much. Now, I did mention the fact yesterday that maybe there's a little fatigue, but I don't think that's arm fatigue necessarily. It might just be like, it's July and I've been throwing pretty well, and I've left a couple pitches where I didn't want him to be. Maybe mechanics got out of whack from being, physically tired. But yeah, I don't think there's an issue. I think maybe if they can find a way to, have a sore calf or something like that in the next couple of months, they might do so and play it by that way. But I'm not concerned.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at. I don't even necessarily think an IL stint needs to come, because then you've got building back up, and all that. I guess if it was just we know it's just going to be 15 days and take the first, 9 days and don't do anything, and then throw a sim game, and then, and pretend that's an actual start, and then go back into your regular between start routine so that you're ready to start on day 15. I wouldn't mind that. But even like we talked about how he's at 109 innings, which is only a pace for 194 innings for the whole season. It's not like he's being worked really hard. And I do expect that pace will go down a little bit, because I do think the Dodgers will probably do even more of a 6-man rotation, and maybe even look for another extra day for him in between starts as much as they can. And that might be enough, because like I said, it's kind of, I know how it sounds when I say, other than the inning where he gave up 5 runs, he looked really good in that game. But other than the inning he gave up 5 runs, he looked really good in that game, and so it's it's easy enough to see that the stuff is still there. All of that is still there. It was just kind of and even that it was an infield single and 2 walks before the grand slam was kind of and an opposite field single. So it's like, it's not like they were hitting him hard other than the grand slam.
And ironically, the way he's pitched the last couple of games has lowered his inning count anyway. So maybe he's giving himself that inning. Maybe that's what he's doing. He's just doing it on his own.
Break, yeah. I'm not going to go deep in games. That's how I'm saving my arm. So, yeah, and realistically, it's going to, like I said, 3 weeks, which means, you and I are doing another 15 episodes between now and the trade deadline, which means we're going to talk about a lot of these names again. It's kind of funny as we come up to the trade deadline, because people are there's like a sense of anger and frustration that the Dodgers aren't doing anything. But the fact is, with the expanded playoffs, there's nothing to do yet. I mean, the Marlins are the only team that's gone into full sell mode, at least as far as actually trading somebody. And so when you look at it, we don't know if Tarek Skubal is going to be available. Tigers say he's probably not. Other people say he might be. We don't really know. We don't know if Garrett Crochet is going to get traded. We don't know if the Rangers are going to go in full sell mode and trade Nathan Eovaldi or Max Scherzer, or I was joking with Clint earlier. Get Jacob deGrom. He's only going to be he's going to be healthy for 6 starts a year. Those 6 starts might as well come for the Dodgers in October. But who knows what's going to happen. And so I would urge patience, because everything that we can see as Dodger fans, I promise you the Dodgers front office can see those same things. People are frustrated that Kike and Chris Taylor are still on the team. There's not really great options to replace them right now. And they could dump Kike, they could dump Kevin Biggio. But all these guys are guys who could end up in trades. No point just DFAing a guy right before the trade deadline for games that ultimately, the games that matter are the ones that come in October. The games happening right now, we're getting to October. And so if we have to watch some more frustrating Kike at bats for a couple weeks while they figure out, as long as, and Kike's bobblehead is on July 24th. He's not getting dumped before his bobblehead night. So we've got 6 days between Kike's bobblehead and the trade deadline. Maybe something happens then, but be patient, because they're definitely working on it, and doesn't mean they'll get the trades done that we want them to. But also, I mean, back in whatever year it was, the trade we wanted them to make was Felipe Vasquez from the Pirates. I think we're all pretty darn glad the Dodgers didn't get that trade done. So who knows what's going to happen, but it'll be a fun 3 weeks anyway.
Yeah, and remember that the Yu Darvish trade came about 20 minutes after the actual deadline by the time we heard about it. And even when the Dodgers got from Max Scherzer, it was reported that he was going to the Padres before that. So July is again one of those months where there's just a lot going on.
Yeah, for sure. I think that'll do it for us. You got anything else, Vince, before we wrap this one up?
Nope.
Dodgers kick off against the Phillies on Tuesday evening. Bobby Miller against, who did I say? Zach Wheeler. So Dodgers will have their work cut out for him offensively, and we'll see if the good version of Bobby Miller can show up for the first time in a while. So that'll do it for us. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Thanks for being here with us live tonight. If you're not, check it out. If you enjoy, we'll be live probably a little bit earlier some of these evenings this week, because they are playing on the East Coast. So the games will end earlier. We're still trying to figure out all the scheduling for that, but we'll be live pretty much every evening this week. So join us there. You can catch us wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. You can go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Just a few bucks a month with a free 14-day trial. I just got distracted. Oh, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSince91. I'm on Twitter at Snydog. DMs are open for both of us there. You can email us, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or you can send a voicemail or a text message to 323-863-LOCK5625. We are here every weekday morning. We hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good one.